Hello everyone, I'm Mitchell Ryan Darcy and welcome to another year, another top number countdown 2018 edition. Woo! Just to let you know, this is not your typical top number countdown for best and worst movies. I do things a bit differently. We got 8 slightly different categories to go through, so if you want to skip ahead to the ones you want to see or choose your own adventure, there's a chapter selection list located in the description of this video. Just to let you know, every single video I list off in this video, I actually have taken the time to edit a video review for. So check out my channel if you're interested in seeing my first before and after reaction and then comparing it to this list. Because yeah, there's been some surprises, I will say that, list-wise. So starting off this video, we got the top 5 worst movies that I saw for the first time in 2018 that wasn't released in 2018. Number 5 is Saw 2. Saw 2 definitely felt like it was the outcast of the first Saw 7 movies, and it just, how good the other ones are, the second one definitely felt lacking. I mean, there's just really one or two good things that they accomplished with the second one, but the rest of it, the potential of the setup just really felt like the movie overall was a letdown. So number 4 was, I had to give it to Resident Evil Extinction. To me, compared to all the other ones, it didn't go all out cheesy, and it wasn't good like the first two, and it was kind of once again, it was the one that stood out the most in terms of how bad it was, and it wasn't what it accomplished with it was not. It just, I don't know, it seemed outcast of the Resident Evil. How many movies did they make? 6. Number 3 was Q, The Winged Serpent. Though I do commend it for trying to do a stop motion creature feature in New York. The worst part of this movie is probably the character that shouldn't have been the lead, or it felt like he was more of a secondary character, but he took center stage throughout the film. Was very weird plot. Like, it felt like it was a different movie for what the monster side of the thing should have been. So for that little detour, and plus also he played the character very, very annoyingly. Sort of got on my nerves as I was watching the film, but there was enough creativity with special effects that, and I had to appreciate some of it, so that's why I didn't rank lower. Number 2 is The Happening. I definitely feel like it was something behind the camera that made this movie so bad. The Happening didn't commit to what the plot was. Like, everything you see in the trailer, for the most part, you see in the film. It's just, there was nothing, like, maybe a couple seconds more of, when it goes really violent or really bad, and then it cuts away. So it's like, I felt like the movie did not commit on several things, but what's stopping it from being number 1 is that it's so bad that some of it you just kind of have to laugh at it, especially when Mark Wahlberg talks to a fake plant. Oh man, that's definitely the highlight of the film. But there was also one or two unexpected. Well, there was specifically one scene that was kind of unexpected with the way it went. So, gotta give it props for that, I guess. Still a pretty bad film. And then number 1 is, I had to give it to Time Walker. It just something about this film that it just felt like it was kind of easy to pick on, but it's just, and the main reason I kind of put this one as the worst is just that ending where it was. It kind of made me question the rest of the film that I watched, because it's like what were they trying to do overall with this product and all that, and I don't want to even talk about this film anymore. Now, for the honorable mentions for the worst movies that I saw for the first time in 2018 that wasn't released in 2018. Yeah, so the honorable mentions for this is not. There's nothing I want to mention that was bad enough to be mentioned. Now, for the honorable mentions of the best movies that I saw for the first time in 2018 that wasn't released in 2018. In alphabetical order, Cult of Chucky. I felt it was good enough that I had to mention it. It wasn't as good as Curse of Chucky, but I still feel that this was a very interesting experience, and it actually went in a direction that I think the Child's Play series wasn't going to go, and they really just went for it with this. Misery is pretty good film. My only complaint is the Family Guy episode that they did this story kind of spoiled it for the most part, but I still think it was extremely well done film. Resident Evil. Yeah, I was actually quite surprised by the first film in the Resident Evil series that I just felt it should be acknowledged. It was very cool. It kind of reminded me of like a. It's like it starts off as like a mission, and then it just turns into, oh, we have to get the hell out of here and try to escape, and it was really good film overall, just well done. CGI may be the more lacking part of the film, but considering the budget and the time, I'm not surprised it was worse. Train to Busan was an extremely well done zombie film, and I needed to mention that film. Here is the top 10 best movies that I saw for the first time in 2018 that wasn't released in 2018. Number 10, Saw 4. Yeah, Saw 4. I pretty much thought this was a pretty damn good Saw film overall. It's definitely like, the lesson of it and what the traps were and all that, and then, like, how the whole setup was, how it paid off and all that. Like, it just I thought it was one of the best of the Saw series. Number 9, Papillon. I think I'm saying it right. I hope I'm saying it right. The original Papillon with Dustin Hoffman, Steve McQueen. Pretty good sort of escape from prison type movie, and I just felt like there was enough about it that was actually quite memorable, and sets it apart from like other escape from prison type movies. And yeah, it's kind of a surprising adventure overall, I felt. Number 8, I put as Moon. Pretty surprising. I've heard a lot of people say it was really good, and so that's one of the reasons why I saw it. And another great complex sci-fi. Wow. That's all I gotta say. Number 7, In the Mouth of Madness, the John Carpenter film. I really, after seeing it, I did have sort of a mixed feeling about what I just watched, especially because it was my first time watching the film. But weeks later, the more I thought about the film, I'm like, that was actually a pretty good film. Like, it did things that were unexpected. You didn't know what you were going to do, what it was going to do, and it kind of, now that you think about it, it's like, it almost feels like you take a trip down madness lane, you know, with all this. Number 6 is Star Wars The Last Jedi. Yes, I'm on the half that really enjoyed and thought it was extremely well done. Star Wars The Last Jedi. I didn't really have a problem with what they did with it, except for there is a kind of unnecessary side quest thing that I felt like was really the worst part of the film. I mean, this movie would probably have been higher on my list if it wasn't for that whole spiel. Number 5 is the first Saw movie. Really good movie. I just kind of wish one of the major twists of the movie was spoiled for me. It was a very well crafted, like, indie film. Almost had that one room type movie, but it's not a one room type movie. There is other things in this movie, but it's a great cast, just extremely well done film. And I definitely feel it definitely deserves to be number 5 on this list. Number 4 is The Shape of Water. The Best Picture winner that I'm like, okay, it won Best Picture, I definitely have to see this movie. I saw it, realized just how good of a movie it was. It had a good plot, good special effects. I mean, it's Guillermo del Toro. I mean, what else were you expecting when you go see a Guillermo del Toro film? Like, honestly. Number 3 is Trick or Treat. Extremely well done anthology films. Not my favorite anthology film, but it is definitely one of the best anthology films. And hell, if it wasn't for the next 2 movies, this one would probably have been number 1. Number 2, the biggest surprise of the year. Going in with absolutely, I don't know what the hell I'm going to expect with this film, and coming out going, wow. Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. I'm a sucker for the meta. I didn't think a movie like this existed. I never thought a movie like this could exist, and it did. And I wasn't really watching horror films in the early 2010s, and this was a really good gem. One of the reasons why I like Scream Factory is I never would have found out about this film if it wasn't for them. So, so many references, so many. I can't talk more about this film without spoiling it, but I think it's definitely worthy of second best. Number 1 is, boom, American Psycho. Do you like American Psycho? This movie, when I finished watching it for the first time, I was really, I didn't know what to think with this film. And it just overall, I was like, it messed with me. And I love movies that mess with you. And this movie is definitely no exception. Extremely well acted. Great cast and great editing. It kept things off toe, and like you didn't know where, like, does he know, does he not know, and it's like, oh, there's so many little good things about this film, surprising. And this was the uncut version, by the way, so I don't know if the theatrical version, what the difference is. And then you got that soundtrack, that use of music, which I'm never gonna unimagine now. Every time I hear those songs, I'm gonna just thinking of American Psycho now. But yeah, that one I think is definitely the best of the not released in 2018 movies that I saw this year for the first time. Now for the section of the video that most people who clicked on this came to see. Here is the top 5 worst movies that I saw for the first time in 2018 that was released in 2018. Number 5 was Robin Hood. This updated, different version of Robin Hood was surprisingly good action-wise, and story was good enough for what it was. Some notable acting, kind of hard to have a bad time with this Robin Hood movie. Even when the last bit of it was it still didn't ruin what I experienced early on with the film, and yeah, that's why it's number 5. Number 4, the best looking movie that's on this worst list, and that is Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. They now, because they set everything up with the first movie, they can just sort of go into it, and even though it went into it, it had a whole bunch of exposition. It's basically, this was like almost like a traveling thing for the wizarding world, like, come visit our place. We got bad guys, good guys, wizards, and see the sights, see what we could do. It's like a travel brochure. And the thing is, the movie does feel like it's just more of a, we're setting things up because in another 3 movies, stuff's gonna happen. That's what kind of feels like. Especially the fact when they did the first one, they were like, oh, we're gonna be doing it into 5 parts. At least I know what I'm getting into. And it definitely shows in the second one. Once again, special effects. I didn't have a boring time with this movie. I actually was somewhat entertained by this movie, but wasn't enough to save it from the worst list. Number 3 is Mortal Engines. The first 30 or 40 minutes, I don't know the amount of time. When they, up until the point of the movie where they get off of London's base, up until that moment, it is so amazing, and I'm like, this is amazing, this is like so cool, action, well done and all that. But then they get off the ship and the rest of the movie happens, and it's like, ugh. And then I come across another thing I liked about the movie, the secondary character that sort of just comes out of left field and doesn't actually feel like it matches or fits in the Mortal Engines universe. I think it's there just because of the book, but I really like that character, and I really like sort of the story with that character, and it's like, why couldn't the whole movie be around that? Or have a whole movie around the first 40 minutes of the movie? Like, even with those 2 good parts, it just, the rest of the movie overall was really inconsistent. At least Crimes of Grindelwald was like, consistent from beginning to end. Number 2 is Action Point, the Johnny Knoxville theme park. The idea of it was kind of cool to have a comedy around. Johnny Knoxville does try his hardest to hurt himself for our enjoyment. It's noted effort-wise is what separates this from the number 1 spot. Did things that it kind of didn't really have to do, and it, like, plot-wise, and it's like, was that really necessary? Though there was 1 or 2 moments that was actually generally funny. For most part, the gags were like, oh, okay, well, that was neat, but not really funny, and stuff like that. So that's why Action Point is number 2. But you know what's number 1? Holmes and Watson. I don't even want to acknowledge this film exists anymore. Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly was just relying on their older movies and just like, oh, people like this type of comedy, we're going to just do the exact same thing, but we'll do it under Sherlock. And, oh man, it's the worst of the ones I saw this year. Now, for the honorable mentions for the worst movies I saw for the first time in 2018, that was released in 2018. This time, we only have 1 honorable mention, and I kind of feel really bad at putting this on the list, but I had to give it to Once Upon a Deadpool. Though the new footage they shot for it was amazing, the fact that you got me to sit through Deadpool 2 again, it was good when it was in its full version that came out earlier this year. Then sitting through it again, but a lot of it cut up and PG-13, like, you guys played with it a little bit, but for the most part, like 85% of the film is dead on the same, for the most part, just with less R-ratedness. Like, it had potential for more of an edit. I wish they played around with the PG-13 jokes a lot more. That it should be almost like every other scene there should be them talking about it or what just happened, or even during major dialogue moments. Like, I felt like they could have done more with this film once upon the Deadpool. And it's unfortunate because it's like, are they going to release this footage now, or is it just a limited time thing? I mean, the good thing about this movie is, when seeing it in theaters when I did, is it went to, some of the money went to charity, but even then it was only in the States, so it's like, if the money only goes to charity if I bought a ticket in the States, I'm in Canada, if I bought a ticket, where did the money go? So, things like that is the reason why Once Upon a Deadpool is deserving of an honorable mention. Now, for the honorable mention for the best movies I saw for the first time in 2018 that was released in 2018. In alphabetical order as well. Ant-Man and the Wasp, I thought was a pretty solid sequel, and because it was a solid sequel, I'm like, hey, I'll put it on the honorable list. I enjoyed it. I love what they did with it, and just wish maybe it was a little more connected to the major event that happened earlier this year, Marvel-wise. But still, Aquaman is worthy of an honorable mention because best special effects I've ever seen in a movie this year, especially in IMAX 3D. Wink. Most well done action scenes, like, just in the way they shot it. It's amazing how, doing these really cool, almost one takes, camera moves around, very gliding around the room as the action unfolds. Like, it just, very cool movie. Plot was better than expected, and the reason for everything, it just, everything looked so good as on top of that, and then you got all these actors who are doing a pretty serious job of Aquaman. Like, wow, Aquaman is definitely deserving of honorable mention. Black Panther, I thought extremely well done origin story, especially the fact that we've already seen Black Panther in Civil War. Seeing now more of his side of everything, it's like, I thought it was good enough for an honorable mention. Deadpool 2, yeah, that's right. Deadpool 2 somehow made the best and the worst honorable mentions for this year. Once Upon a Deadpool almost kind of, because seeing it's basically Deadpool 2 again. I'm reminded how much I kind of a little bit disliked Deadpool 2, but I do admit it was pretty good. Like, the first time I saw it, it was pretty good, and second time seeing the movie, it didn't really hold up, but it just, curse you, Once Upon a Deadpool. But Deadpool 2 is still a good enough sequel, nowhere near as good as the first Deadpool, but I felt it was good enough for the honorable list. Take a shot every time you hear me say that. Halloween. And this film felt like it was a really well done fan film of, like, the original. Like if they were going to do a sequel in modern day times, like this. So many moments in the film I was like, oh, I see what they did there. Oh, it's such a great tribute to the original, and it did everything right that the original one did as well. Like, it felt like a genuine continuation, even though there's a 40-year gap. Like, that's a big gap for a sequel. The Incredibles 2. I thought it was good. It just, after what, 14 years for a sequel? I've grown up, and unfortunately, this movie was good. It's just, if it came out 12 years earlier, I would have probably have loved it even more, but it didn't, so I'm like, it's good enough to mention for best. Overlord. Overlord is J.J. Abrams' little out-of-nowhere project that he produced. It's World War II horror done in such a way that the World War II aspects of it felt pretty real, and then the horror aspects was pretty crazy. So it's like a pretty great film. A Quiet Place. A Quiet Place was an extremely well done film. It was just a really cool, neat little horror film that did very well. I really wish I saw this in theaters instead of seeing it at home by myself. Ralph Breaks the Internet. Ralph Breaks the Internet is, without a doubt, a pretty interesting sequel where they decide to go with it. Not exactly how I was imagining it as when they announced they were going to do it like this. I was kind of hoping it was a little more focused on the online gaming portion than the online internet. But even though I'm a little disappointed there, Disney proved to me that, hey, it may not be what you wanted, but hell, we still did a pretty good job with it. Solo, a Star Wars movie. It was a pretty good movie. I loved it. Okay, I'm sorry. The only thing, my problem with the film is why didn't the original director stay on, and why did they have to reshoot 90% of it? I want to see their version of the film. I don't want to see Ron Howard. I mean, I know Ron Howard's a good filmmaker and all, but now I'm just questioning because I'm like, hey, I kind of enjoyed the Ron Howard version of the film. What was the original film's going to be like? And that I'm never going to find out, am I, Disney? A Star is Born is best musical I've seen this year. That's for sure. Extremely well done. Extremely well, like, it felt really quite personal, even though you're dealing with, like, a superstar, famous musician type setting. Even though it did sort of went into areas that were a bit stereotypical of stars and people who are famous, I still felt it was done and handled really well, and the acting is definitely top notch, especially on Lady Gaga's part. I'm going to be interested to see how well this movie does during awards seasons. This one kind of had to mention because this sort of personal favorite of the year is Tag. Tag was, I thought, was a pretty good comedy for the most part, and it kind of reminded me personally, I remember playing tag with my friends, and it sort of brought back memories, and it's nice having a movie where it's like there's not a major villain or anything. It was more of a, it's just friends. And final honorable mention goes to Venom. A movie that I thought was going to be terrible going into it, and I came out of it loving it. It was just that good. I felt it was that good. I'm really excited to see a sequel. What more can I say? I felt Sony actually captured a bit of the early Marvel Cinematic Universe type origin stories, like the original, like, Iron Man and Thor and stuff like that, but for Venom, though not as good, Venom I still incredibly enjoyed. Here it is, the grand finale list of grand finale lists. The top 10 best movies that I saw for the first time in 2018 that was released in 2018. Number 10 is Welcome to Marwen. It's not a perfect film, but I thought it was extremely well done. And I'm just surprised how, even with the special effects of the motion capture and all that, and the scenes of action and almost imagination, pure imagination, I guess. I still was surprised how emotional and personal it was. And Steve Carell is one of the main reasons why. Number 9 is Wes Anderson's Isle of Dogs. Probably one of the original feeling, like, creative films of the year, heavily inspired by, Japanese type history and art and all that. And then you got Wes Anderson's style of animation, which he's only really done in one other film, and that is the Fantastic Mr. Fox. And it was such a unique mix. The biggest well-known cast I've ever seen and assembled under one film. Even though it is voice acting, it's still, wow, that list of cast. Definitely a movie to check out if you like animation or Wes Anderson. Number 8, They Shall Not Grow Old. The best documentary I've seen this year. Unfortunately, it is also my only documentary I've seen this year. History brought alive again. It extremely, like, I felt Peter Jackson made all the right decisions when it came to this documentary. My only complaint is I wish more of the footage was done totally restored, but I do understand of time and money and all that to do it, but I'm just glad they did it with what they did do. It is definitely an experience. Number 7, a movie I didn't think would actually still be on my top 10 list by the end of the year, but somehow, even though I only saw it once, I'm still thinking about this film, and that is The Death of Stalin. I thought it was a very darkly funny take on a very real situation and time, and supported by an extremely great cast. I'm just, it was the kind of movie where it's like the more I think about it, I'm like, that was actually pretty well done, and I think it's very disturbing of number 7 on the list. I just hope they release the Blu-ray in North America, because right now I think they've only released it on DVD for some reason. There's even talks that maybe Criterion might actually pick up this film, which I'm also surprised, but it kind of makes sense now that I think about it. Number 6 is Steven Spielberg's Ready Player One. It's another movie where I'm like, it was extremely entertaining of a movie, but I'm not sure how well it's going to hold up, and I saw it twice in theaters, and it was just, even though the plot is quite, like, simple, it was just so cool seeing so many different properties in one film. I'm not gonna lie. The fact that Steven Spielberg took a book that was not as well received and not as great from what I've heard, and there are problems with the book. He took that book and made it into a decently great film. I definitely think it's one of the best, especially with that movie reference played out in the middle of the film. Like, oh man, that alone was worth the price of admission. Number 5 was Bad Times at the El Royale, a noir bit of everything. This movie, amazing cast, amazingly well done, though it is reminded me a bit of a Quentin Tarantino film. For the most part, it was able to distinct itself from Quentin Tarantino, and kind of be its own thing, its own bag of things coming together, and just, everything falling apart and not going the way you thought it would. And oh man, well done, great cast. That's all I ask. Number 4, boom, Mission Impossible Fallout, the 6th one in the Mission Impossible franchise, which shows that if you do work really hard, you can still make a very entertaining and very good sequel. Tom Cruise is definitely the one, definitely just keep pushing himself for these stunts and all that. Like, you gotta appreciate, like, you may hate the Mission Impossible franchise, but you gotta appreciate the effort and the stuff he does and accomplish with this film stunt-wise. Like, my gosh, really liked the plot with this one, and this one, it was kind of a movie where I'm like, I wouldn't mind rewatching several times, like, and not just for the stunts. I thought it was worthy of number 4. Number 3, First Man, in my opinion, was the best biopic of the year. By far, I just loved how down to earth First Man was. I'm sorry to, I mean, because they're going to the moon, down to earth. Anyways, extremely well done. Very interesting soundtrack, especially for the moon landing. Like, it was its own thing, the way they did it, and it just reminds me of how it's like 100 years ago we didn't have airplanes everywhere and space travel and satellites and dish and all that, and it's like it just reminded how far humans have come technology wise and everything. And it's just a reminder. It's like we're still pushing the boundaries of stuff. It's like, where will we end up in several decades and all that, and it's like this movie sort of reminded me all that while still telling a personal story with Armstrong, and I think it's third best of the year. Number 2, Avengers: Infinity War, the climactic collision of everything that the Marvel Cinematic Universe was building towards. It has begun in this movie, and it's so great, so great. Probably the movie blockbuster event of the year. Really unfortunate. It was the IMAX first movie ever filmed entirely with the IMAX ratio of really big, filmed with IMAX cameras and all that, and they only had a 2-week engagement IMAX wise before another movie pushed it out of IMAX, and that is really, really quite unfortunate. And plus, a lot of the marketing wasn't around, hey, this is the first ever full IMAX movie. Like, I didn't really see anything of that. Even the posters, like, the posters was like, oh, filmed with IMAX cameras, but it doesn't say entirely filmed with IMAX cameras. Like, okay, it might not have been the first film, because I think some documentaries have been filmed entirely in IMAX cameras. The first Hollywood story type movie to be done with an IMAX cameras, like, from beginning to end. Yeah, so this movie is number 2, which actually surprised me that something was actually able to beat it. Especially the movie that is my number 1, which is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, is the best movie of 2018 that was released in 2018, in my opinion. I didn't think it would beat Avengers: Infinity War, but somehow it just did. One of the best looking films of the year, including live action. Wow. Every frame is a comic book in this film, but it's not stereotypically comic book. They made it look like a comic book, but they didn't cheesily do what the older Hulk movie, the Ang Lee Hulk movie did, where they edit it like it's a comic book. This movie did the comic book look without cheesily doing the comic book look. Some parts where they did use elements of comic books, like style-wise and all that, to tell stories or stuff that was happening and whatnot, and very comedic, but also very, very surprisingly dark in some areas where it went, and emotional, and like the fact that midpoint of the film, and I'm like, I love Miles Morales Spider-Man, and I'm so attached to his story now, even though it's a movie that crosses over several Spider-Man from several different comics. I'm surprised how well balanced the film was, in a sense that it was still a story about him. Extremely well done, and I want to see the rest of the Spider-Verse universe. I want to see all the sequels. I'm totally 100% on board, and I am absolutely shocked that the best movie of the year is a Sony Spider-Man movie, especially after the other missteps in Spider movies. But another brilliant thing with this film is that maybe those are alternate Spider-Man verses. The Tobey Maguire Spider-Man verse and the, Andrew Garfield one. Wow, I didn't think of that, but maybe it is. Oh man, the possibilities this movie opens up if it's continued to be well written like this, well animated, just well done like it was. I am totally open for as many sequels as you want to push out, Sony, if all of them are going to be well done like this film. My only complaint with this film is I wanted more, and that is the best complaint. Is I want more. In fact, I want to see a. I would love to see a solo movie for each one of these characters that they introduce in this. Like, wow, so many Easter eggs. If you're a Spider-Man fan, my gosh, it is definitely worthy of the best films of the year. And so that ends my 2018 top best and worst films that I saw for the first time this year. So, thank you very much for watching. I want you to have a nice day or night or whatever time you watch this. Have a nice whatever. Check out my other stuff. And until next year, watch movies, I guess.